Hello, welcome back to my channel where we discuss the MCC laws of cricket. Today we are discussing the law 2, the umpires. Now this is a pretty comprehensive law which gives in quite some detail all the provisions which apply to umpires. There are many provisions there and it will not be possible for us to finish this in one session. So I plan to do it in two, maybe three sessions. To begin with, the law speaks about the appointment of two umpires, one for each end. It is not one for each side, so we are not really playing 12-a-side game. And the broad role of the umpire is to control the game with absolute impartiality as required under the laws. And impartiality is a very important part of the umpire's role. The law also tells us that the umpire shall arrive at the ground at least 45 minutes before the start of the game. I will lay emphasis on the term at least, and I will want to tell you that in my umpiring days I used to plan to arrive at the ground at least 1 hour, 60 minutes before the start of the game. And when applying a cushion for in a busy city like Bombay, applying a cushion for the delays, possible delays, train delays or traffic delays, more often than not, I used to find myself arriving at the ground before anybody else, which was not a bad thing really. I was quite comfortable doing that. It gave me plenty of time to change into my shoes, my shirt, put on my tie, take out my equipment. We used to have coats at that time. Wear coats at that time, take out my coat, put it on a hanger, put the various things in the different pockets there. It would bring me back, it would bring me into the focus of the game. It helped me to do that. And then when my colleague arrived, I advise you to do that. Go around the ground, along the edge of the ground. Maybe you will spot there's some ground which have overhanging trees. You might not see it from the middle, but make a note of those. Where is the side screen placed? Is it outside? It has to be outside, as you know it. And while you are walking along the periphery, keep an eye on the inside of the ground towards the square, where you look out for maybe soft patches and all that. All of this, and this is a time to get acquainted with your colleague also. If you have not known him earlier, talk about a few things that you might exchange ideas, and then come back and get ready for the nomination and for the toss. This has helped me enormously, and I would highly recommend any umpire to try and follow this practice. Now, after the appointment of the umpire is done, the law makes it extremely difficult for an umpire to be changed. It cannot be done at the whim or fancy of the two captains. Though if a change is required on account of illness, injury, or in very exceptional circumstances, the two captains must concur. But which doesn't mean that they don't like an umpire. They say no, they made 3 or 4 mistakes and we change it. That's not done. When an umpire is replaced, there is a regulation you must keep in mind that we have discussed a replacement player. Now, as you very well know, that a replacement player takes over entirely from the player who has been replaced. He is a full-fledged player. Not so with the replacement umpire. The replacement umpire will, by default, stand only a square leg, and the other umpire will go from the bowler's end to the bowler's end, unless the two captains decide that this replacement umpire is a completer umpire himself and can take charge of the match in full charge of the match, and then he will be allowed to umpire at the bowler's end too. The law also tells us that prior to the toss, the two umpires, in consultation with the two captains, carry out certain duties and decide on a few things, like the ball which are to be used during the match. When we come to the law of the ball, we will be discussing about the things that the umpire should be doing with regard to checking the size and weight of the ball and all that. Then they will also decide the hours of play and the duration of the interval. Most of the time these are given. You are going playing in a tournament. These are already pre-decided and given. Nothing to decide here. But remember, there is law 11 which allows for change in these timings. We'll talk about that later. Then we come to, they will decide, the two umpires have to decide with the two captains the clock or watch to be followed during the match. I have always found the clock on the ground an unreliable thing, and therefore the best thing to do is the watches of the two umpires should be synchronized, and you tell the captains, look, we have the time as 10:05. You might note down that time, synchronize your watches, and most captains will do that. But tell me, how many of you I want to point out to a particular provision here. It's an important provision. How many of you really decide on a backup timepiece when to be used during the match? I bet not many. The law says that, provides that you will decide on the clock or watch and a backup timepiece. It has this provision there for a reason. Let me tell you what happened to me in a Ranji Trophy match, which is a first class match in India. The game was being played at Hyderabad, and it was a game played between Hyderabad and Tamil Nadu, Hyderabad on Karnataka, I don't remember which. Now, it was approaching lunchtime, 12 o'clock, and I was at the bowler's end. I had the time very close to 12 o'clock, and I was looking at my colleague, and he wasn't responding. I wanted his confidence that we are not playing the next over, and maybe he wanted to check that, but he wasn't responding, and he nonchalantly walked and stopped. Decided to start, indicated that he's starting an over from there. According to me, we were past 12 o'clock. Now, I didn't know perhaps how to deal with it, and I went along with it. We didn't know really what was wrong, and we played that over. Actually, we started that over after time had been reached, which was wrong. Failure to assert myself, this provision wasn't there at the time. And then when we discussed while coming off, he said, "Yeah, I've forgotten to wind my watch." He was wearing an heirloom given to him by his father, which he had forgotten to wind. Now, when we went inside, a lot of people knew, a lot of people have the time, and a lot of people knew that we had started the over, and this was being broadcast on All India Radio at the time. Now, one of the commentators, one Mr. Mohanlal Gupta, he was also an umpire, and he used to wear many hats. He was also an umpire, a scorer, and a commentator. He came to us and said, "I think you started that over after time." We had to confess, and because he was an umpire, it got sort of covered up, and nobody really noticed, and nobody spoke to us. But it was a bad mistake to do. And I would advise you to decide on a backup timepiece. What I would suggest you do is, the backup timepiece can always be the watch worn by the scorer. He's already synchronized with you, and you tell the two captains, "Look, we have synchronized the watches. This is the time we have." The scorer also has the time. In case of failure of our watches, we don't have the time to decide. We will simply ask that man, "What is the real time?" And we'll follow that. Follow this process, because it will take you out of trouble one day. Just remember that the law provides this for a reason, and do it, and you will find that one day it saves you. You don't want somebody like, say, Sunil Gavaskar, who was pretty sharp on the field of play, and he would casually come and ask you, "Mr. Umpire, I think we started that over, the last over after time was reached." You would be in very serious trouble if something like that happened and you wouldn't know what to say. And there are many players like that who would, and it gives a very bad impression about the control you have over the game, and time control is very, very important for the umpires to do. My recommendations are synchronize your watches, decide on a backup time, please. Tell the two captains. Fine? Fine. Now going ahead with what the umpires need to do prior to the match before the toss in consultation with the two umpires. They have to decide on the boundaries for play. In a lot of places the boundaries are well defined, but that might not be the case. So you have to define the boundary. You have to decide the allowances for boundaries. There are certain now when you come to law 19 about the boundaries, there are detailed provisions there. But in a lot of places, it is possible that the boundary allowance might not be 6 and 4. Normally it is, but there will be nothing to decide. But be on the guard. What is specially to be paid attention to is that is there any obstacle within the playing area? You might be umpiring on a ground which is a playground for school children, and there may be a hockey goalpost or a football goalpost or a rugby goalpost there in the middle of the ground. You will have to decide along with the captains what are you exactly going to do, whether or not you are going to treat this as a boundary throughout, and that has to be followed throughout the game. Then you have to decide, the two captains the umpires will decide the use of covers. There are special provisions. There is the law 10 governing covers. We'll discuss that in detail. This is just a listing of the things that you are supposed to be discussing in the pre-match meeting, and there are any special conditions out there. Now, a lot of these conditions have to be informed. Decisions that you take here should be informed to the scorers who are part of your team, because they need to note down what the boundary is and allowances and all that. They should know. Should know the timings and all. It is important that they do. You make sure that they do. After this meeting, you go straight to them, tell them this is what has been decided and will be followed throughout the game. Now, adding to this somewhat comprehensive list, from my experience, let me tell you 2 or 3 things that you might add. I would recommend that you do. When you go to a ground, you may be umpiring at a test venue. You might be seeing lined up maybe 5 rollers there. Not all will be available to you in that particular game. So you better ask the groundsman which of the rollers are available, and he'll probably tell you, I've got the light roller and I've got the heavy roller. And you identify which is the light roller, which is the heavy roller, and because what is big is not necessarily heavy, because it could be hollowed out. So you be sure what is meant by the heavy roller and what is the light roller, and all of this you inform to the two captains. And this has to be rigidly followed. You must make sure that no other roller should come onto the ground at any stage of the match. Some home teams have played some tricks. They do it. It's been known to be done. So you will circumvent that. You will make sure that this doesn't happen during the game by making sure that you inform the two captains. These are the 2 rollers available in the game, 2, 3, whatever. In another part of the laws, you will find that the laws provide that daily mowing of the outfield is to be done by default, but the laws allow that in case it is not possible, the groundsman might follow a pattern, say, I'll mow the outfield every alternate day. This, you make sure that you inform the two captains at the time before the toss. You can add this to this particular list. You ought to have a to-do list, pre-match to-do list. I suggest you make one for yourself to follow and tick them off in any game. The third thing which I would want you to do is, we already told you that Law 10 deals with covering of the pitch. I suggest you decide on a fixed time for removal of the covers, provided the weather is fine. Why is that? I have seen tricks being played by the home team about when on different days covers are removed on different days. If your own team is batting, you will remove the covers late so that dew doesn't get to the pitch. If the other team is batting, you might remove the covers early and let the dew fall on the pitch and affect the condition of the pitch. I have seen this happen, and I suggest that in a first class game this will happen, and I suggest you make sure that this doesn't happen in your game. Expand your list slightly, add something more if you think you can, but these are the things I would strongly recommend that you add these three things. After that, the laws say that coming to wickets, creases and boundaries. Now here the provision of the law says that it is the duty of the umpires to ensure before the toss and during the match that the wickets are properly pitched and the creases are correctly marked. He shall check on them in the beginning, and throughout the match he will make sure that these conform with the laws. There is a separate law, the law 8, the wickets, which tells us in detail about what the wickets are, what comprise the wickets, what are the measurements. We'll come to all of that later. How the creases are marked, the creases, the size of the creases, all that, which of them are unlimited in length, all of those provisions we will discuss in detail here. Here to list that wickets are properly pitched and creases are properly marked and boundaries of the field complies with the requirements of the related laws. Again, decide before the match and follow it, decide before the toss and follow it throughout the match. Therefore, if a boundary is disturbed, boundary line is disturbed, it is no longer conforming with what was decided. So you have to make sure that all of this is decided and before the toss and consistently followed throughout the game. The crease markings, if they get spoiled, you have to ensure that they are renewed, and this falls within the duties of the two umpires. Throughout the match, they have to see wickets. That is why you see the umpire running up and making sure the wickets are made and checking with his colleague. He keeps an eye on the creases, which are important for various purposes, and gets them renewed from time to time, because this provision says that throughout the match he's got to make sure that they are conforming with the laws. And similarly, the boundary, the physical boundary of the game. Now going further with law, the provisions of law 2, just like we saw for the wickets and creases, etc. About conduct of the match and implements and equipment which are used in the game. The law says that it is the duty of the umpires to ensure before the toss and during the match. Now during the match, you know already, you read in Appendix A what is meant by during the match, that the conduct of the match is in accordance with the laws throughout the match. You are the first guardian of the laws. You will make sure that all the provisions of the laws are followed, no compromises, no partiality. And the implements used in the match. What are the implements used in the match? There the Appendix A tells you what are the implements. Please have a look at those implements which are there, listed there. Implements used in the match. Measurements are given in the following laws regarding the ball. External visible requirements of Law 5, the bat, and size of stumps and bails, all of these. And no player, the umpires have to ensure that no player uses equipment which is not permitted under the laws. That is also their duty, and that the wicketkeeper's gloves comply with the provisions. We've all seen that there are appendices which describe what equipment is to be worn. Even the helmet is now described. If it doesn't conform, you make sure that throughout the match, the bat, at all times, you must ensure that the bat which the batsman carries looks at least to you to conform, and you can check on that. I used to always carry a tape in my pocket, a small 3-meter tape, 2-meter tape, and I had an opportunity where you're dealing with cricket bats all your life, and that bat looked a little suspiciously broad. It was in a junior match, board match, junior match, and I asked him, "Can I see the bat, please?" took out my tape and measured it. It was more than 4 1/4 inches. So that is part of our duties to ensure that the implements and the equipment are all used within the laws. Always keep an eye on the wicket keepers' gloves, what they are doing. I would also say what the fielders are wearing on their hands. Nowadays there is a lot of bandaging going on. I think it is part of the umpire's job to curtail malpractices in that area also, because you are the first guardian of the law and you have to ensure that all the provisions, because the law here says that conduct of the match is strictly in accordance with the laws. That is your mandate, and this is what you are supposed to do. I suggest you take that job seriously. Now we'll end this episode here because it's pretty long already, and we'll continue with Law 2.6 Fair and Unfair Play in the next session. Bye.